You're tuned in to RX Radio.
Continue.
So, Barry Seal, American made.
Yeah, familiar with the story.
He smuggles the drugs for Escobar. He works with the CIA, who's selling the drugs to like the inner cities of the United States.
That's Highway Rick Ross.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and then they're taking the money, they're buying guns, decommissioned weapons, and then selling those guns to the Contras who are fighting the Sandinistas in South America.
Okay.
They're fighting communism. So this show, Snowfall, is mainly about this kid who's like 17, 18 years old, who starts selling weed in Compton in the 80s, gets into selling cocaine, but his story parallels the actual story of like the CIA smuggling all these drugs.
So like the same shady illegal shit, they're just doing it like legally as a government, and they're playing out two parallel stories.
Yeah.
Is there like a protagonist on the side of like the CIA? So,
Yeah.
So it follows another character on the other side.
There's three like storylines that run concurrently to one another.
And does he get persecuted?
I haven't got that far in.
Okay. You know what the weird thing is? The trend around like Netflix specials went from like very subtly, it seems, over the last 6 months, went from serial killers to everything to do with Miami
Yeah.
and cocaine smuggling. Like Cocaine Cowboys.
Yeah.
The fucking Operation Odessa.
Oh.
Have you seen it? You saw it? Lundy, you seen it?
No, I haven't seen it.
I saw
Banger. Holy fuck.
Where is it?
Explain
How
it.
do I find it?
Operation Odessa. I watch it. I'll tell you, I watch it for free on YouTube. Sorry, guys. But the most fitting way to watch a smuggler movie is I'm just going to pirate the fuck out of it.
So Operation Odessa,
best.
I saw it in 2018.
Has it been out for that long?
Yeah, it was
Okay.
I believe it's a Showtime documentary.
It's amazing.
Basically about Tarzan, the guy who owns Porky's in Florida.
It's a strip joint.
It's a strip joint named after Porky's, the Canadian like teen movie, The American Pie Before American Pie.
Right. Yeah. That's right. And he was Russian. They were all Russian. No,
He's Russian.
he was Russian.
But then he basically gets in with the cartels, and they want him to buy a nuclear sub to smuggle drugs.
Because it started off like luxury cars, shit like that, yachts, super yachts, and then I think it progressed to like helicopters. They got these like fucking forest fire fighting helicopters that carried like drums, like 500 gallons of water, and they're just filling them up with cocaine,
Which I mean
and
is
just
the
and just dropping them in like southern Florida. And then they're like, you know what? This is costing us a lot of money. Let's increase the payload of these vehicles. So there's a fucking picture of this guy Tarzan who ends up in Russia standing atop a nuclear submarine that he was going to buy, correct me if I'm wrong, for $500. Was that what it was? It was $500, and he was going to sell it to the Colombian drug cartels for $3.5 million.
How does one...
Dude, just like the one guy, this Tarzan guy, goes, and he has like a business partner that runs like a semi-legitimate like car rental, yacht rental, and he's South American. So like it was the quickest like thinking on your feet, like, yo, just go with it scenario, where this guy rolls up and says he's working for Escobar, and everyone knows Escobar at that point is like this like, you know, he's a synonymous figure with drug dealing in South America. And so the Russians just immediately like kind of fall in line, like, oh shit, this guy's not some fucking like this pleb. This guy works for like the most dangerous drug lord in the entire world. And so he calls his homie who just like rents expensive cars and was like, yo, they think you're Escobar, just go with it. And the guy fucking flies into Russia and just pretend, because no one's ever seen him at this point, right? He's just this sort of veiled, shadowy figure that's like this entity that sits atop like the Colombian drug cartels. And he was just like, it is I, Escobar. And they just go with it. And they end up on like some foreclosed, everything must go BOGO military sale. And there's two of them just standing, like, you can tell as a picture's being taken, they're like, holy fuck, I cannot believe this worked. And they're just standing with like this semi-submerged submarine. And they turn around and then go, hey, we're going to sell this to you for $3.5 million. Like, yeah, it's kind of steep. And it's like, yeah, but 2 runs of a full submarine and you've made your money back. And I think like the whole thing fell through and someone snitched and then someone rolled and it's always someone's girl that messes it up.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just saying. It seems to be the trend. Anyways, Snowflake.
Snowfall.
Sorry. Snowflake is the tech company.
I'm Snowflake.
You are Snowflakes. We actually use Killian's leg to white balance the shot.
Yeah, codename Snowflake. But yeah, Snowfall. So it's just it's an interesting story. Obviously, like the narrative with the kid is probably just like an aggregate of thousands of stories of people who end up being, arrested on doing things the government's already doing. But overall, this show is pretty exciting.
So it's like a meta character.
Yeah, I would say so. It's probably an amalgamation of many people.
Have you ever seen Us?
The movie?
Yeah.
That your boy wrote?
So I have a friend, Dylan Park. Shout out Dylan Park if the borders ever open up again and it's easy to travel. He's a producer. He was a lawyer. Really crazy backstory. Served in Afghanistan. Wrote a book. Has like this wild story that it's a true story. Cut through the noise. I'll let him tell it when he comes on the show. But yeah, he wrote the story of this urban legend because he's from Campbell, California, which is just the other side of Santa Cruz Mountains. And Monkey Paw Studio ripped it off, and like there's like the original screenplay. He's got like emails back and forth, and it's that movie where it's like a paralleled family that's meant. I don't even know the point of it, but it sounds very kind of similar, like society's oppression. It sounds like a racially driven thing.
Yeah, I don't know. Like when I watched Us, I don't know if like the racial subplot was as strong as possibly like Get Out was.
Right.
But yeah, like without spoiling Us, I think like obviously Jordan Peele likes to have like a little bit of a twist and whatever, so I won't spoil it for him. Jordan Peele, come on the podcast. We'll talk movies. He's also producing the remake of Candyman, which I don't know how I feel about because Candyman's the greatest horror movie of all
I don't
time.
know anything about it. What's it about?
All right, so let's switch to Candyman. Urban legend movie.
Okay.
Basically about this guy. Get into it. Basically, he's like made the scapegoat during slave times, but it's kind of like the Bloody Mary thing. People go into their bathroom, they say Candyman, Candyman, Candyman. He shows up and he just fucks shit up. He's a big fan of bees as well.
So it's like Black Guy Beetlejuice?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
But the original movie had like this really rich, like racially driven subplot of this, like the female main character played by Virginia Madsen, putting aside a lot of the evils of this Candyman-like character due to kind of learning his backstory and like the white guilt associated like between the two characters and their relationship.
So the female's white?
Yeah.
And
he's black.
This always brings up an interesting like storyline that plays out in movies and in real life is the infatuation with the bad guy. And like I understand like the George Costanza takes Frank's fucking whatever, his GTO out or whatever. But like the number of women that send pen pal letters to men in prison is alarming.
Yeah.
I know guys who can't get dates on the outside, and there's dudes in the pen that have girlfriends.
Well, I saw an Instagram story the other day by somebody who said, if you don't have a favorite serial killer, you're weird. And then said mine is Ted Bundy.
Thing?
Yeah.
Okay, that's, you know who, I'll tell you what female this is, because clearly we're trying to get canceled. If you own a French bulldog, you are immediately into serial killers. I have yet to meet a girl who owns a French bulldog that is not into serial killer
What about
docos.
Chihuahuas?
Not they're people who own those aren't human beings, other than our boy Lou.
Shout out Liz though, she cuts my hair.
Okay, Liz, Lou, I mean, I like dogs, but at that point, you just own a ferret,
I guess so.
right? You're just that guy from fucking
Kindergarten Cop?
no,
Remember the kid?
the fucking Big Lebowski. Is that a ferret or a muskrat or some shit?
Ferret.
Anyways, what were we talking about?
The infatuation with the bad guy.
Yeah, I don't understand. Like, here's my thing: it's single men that are not in prison. You're fucking up hard
because you're not going to prison.
I just think you clearly aren't showing enough commitment. At least I think that's what it is. The idea that he committed a crime. That's like the Seinfeld thing of like Jerry signaled that he went all the way. Like not are all the way, they're all the way.
Yeah.
Right? There's been a commitment. The commitment was a felony in most cases. Mm-hmm. But I think that's what it is. I think people in prison at least show a signal that I can commit something.
I think it's also like maybe like the savior thing. Like I can change this person.
Yeah,
they won't lust for blood again.
Yeah, I hope he's not going to do what he's going to do.
But
yeah,
he will.
But he will.
He loves that blood.
That story is old as time, really.
Big blood guy. Not myself, but
Yeah.
all those who are in prison for the bloodendings.
So, Snowfall.
Snowfall, great show. You should check it out. I was a big fan.
Can't do shows are too big of a commitment. for me. I can't do it. I will literally, when Tess put something on, it was like, only movies. This needs to be over.
Yeah, I'm not a big show guy either. Like, I'm very apprehensive to get into shows.
Right. It's a relationship.
It is.
I've watched Breaking Bad. It was the only one I ever watched like cover to cover. And it's lasted longer than some relationships.
And it's funny because the longer I watched Breaking Bad, the less I enjoyed it.
Explain.
I don't like shows. So it's like what you just talked about, the infatuation with the bad guy.
Right.
Like Walter White is a piece of shit.
But I think it's like such a it's like an id and superego thing. I think that's what I like about it. So wait, the longer you liked it, meaning the more he is a bad guy?
But
you
he was
like
always,
it in the transitory phase?
He was always a bad guy.
Okay.
But it's like they sell you on the bad guy by giving him cancer, which masks the character traits he always had that made him a piece of shit.
Right.
And then when cancer no longer becomes like the man versus thing,
right.
and it's just him lusting after money and power,
right.
I'm over the character. Like, I'm not going to keep watching this guy be a dick.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I think that the fact that it tells that transition, the fact that I keep rooting for him is what I like about the story.
See, I've watched it more than once, but I realized that there was never a transition. You think the character transfers to like, now this guy is greedy?
Right. It's just revelatory.
But he was always that
He's
way.
always that. Yeah, I guess there's
he just wasn't put in the position to have the opportunity to be that way.
It's like kids at Bangir. And then all of a sudden they're these tough guys, and they're just like these little pieces of shit that are real scrappy.
Yeah,
it's like you were always
yeah.
that, but you couldn't act on it because you didn't have the means in which to do it.
Drugs don't make you an asshole. You're an asshole now times 10.
Right. It's the old bigger, faster, stronger thing.
Yeah.
Right. If you were an asshole at like 150 pounds, you'd be an asshole at 250 pounds.
Yeah, and that's what ruined that show for me. I also watched Mayor of Easttown, another great show. Mayor of Easttown, great. Kate Winslet's great in it. But another thing where she's just an insufferable person. And I don't like... I don't care if people are the bad guy, but I just don't need to watch someone who's insufferable. I'm insufferable.
Yeah.
I don't need more of me.
That's fair. Yeah. I could see where you might need a dose of that if you weren't friends with you.
Yeah.
I couldn't watch it. I'm friends with you.
I know. You don't need it. I need a happy-go-lucky show. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, and that's my, I don't know. I go back and forth when I watch movies now because it's like, am I looking for just mindless, like drive a stake through my brain, like turn my brain off? But at that point, it's just eat an edible.
Yeah, like I go through the same thing with like, because obviously I watch these like art house bullshit movies that I watch, German impressionist film or whatever, and then I'll watch Billy Madison, and I'll just watch the beginning of that movie where he chased the penguin so many times. But it's the same thing. Like, it's to what level of like burnout or fatigue I have.
Yeah.
It's like, man, Friday afternoon, I'm not watching some fucking in-depth, deep movie.
I got that.
Throw on Billy Madison on Sunday morning. Maybe I'll get into something crazy.
You need to be rested. It's an event.
Yeah, it is an event.
I get that.
It weighs on me heavy.
Actually, though.
Yeah.
I guess, I don't know. I tried to watch that I can't do anything with dogs.
That die.
I can't do that. When they hucked the thing over the fence for that one movie you told me to watch, Don't Breathe, and like I was like, oh, the dog's going to get hurt. I literally turned it off before he ate whatever the fuck they put in that thing.
Yeah.
I was like, fuck those kids. Why did that have to be in a movie?
The dog doesn't die.
Did he come back and fuck him up?
He comes back in the sequel.
What?
Huh.
See, I couldn't even get past John Wick for that. The whole premise of the movie is like, because that would be me. If I had a dog and someone killed it, over. Like, I remember being a kid and watching Butterfly Effect. You ever seen that movie? Mm-hmm. Ethan Suplee, Ashton Kutcher. And there was just an inexplicable scene that added nothing to the movie of a dog, like, obviously the dog, no dogs were hurt in the making of this film, like burning in a burlap sack. And I walked, it was like one of those things where like the mom dropped off the van full of girls, the dad dropped off the van full of guys, and everyone sort of had like a girlfriend or whatever. Lundy, it's so weird having Lundy in the room for this because like I feel like he knows everyone. It was Buttonary, Patterson, me, Marshall, and like Benson. And I just left the fucking Devonshire Mall Theater in the middle of the movie.
I'm more interested in who the girls were.
Oh, fuck if I remember.
That'd be a funny thing to know. But that's hilarious.
Yeah. I'm sure no one's listening and no one probably remembers this.
But
yeah.
if you are listening and
Yeah,
we're at
phone
Devonshire
it in.
Mall.
Phone it in. Yeah, I just can't do it. I don't think it adds anything to the movie.
I mean, I think it does. It's usually like some kind of like loaded plot device.
I think it's cheap.
It is cheap.
I think it's a cheap way to evoke an emotional reaction.
Oh, exactly.
I think there's
what
other
it is.
ways to do it. That's like it's the fart joke of like disgust and gore. and horror.
Okay.
It's the same thing. It's like
No.
deploy. No.
No, okay, because fart jokes are lowbrow.
Right.
But farts themselves
I can't with you
are
farts.
hilarious.
I feel
So
so,
funny.
Lundy?
outnumbered.
So
I
funny.
knew you were going to go to Lundy. That's bullshit.
No, like
Not
a
funny.
joke about farts isn't funny to me. Even a fake fart,
Just a
not
fart.
funny.
Now, whoopee cushion, not funny.
No.
Okay.
But a real fart
Okay.
is so funny.
You're like
Yeah.
at the all right. So setting a scene, Step Brothers when he's in the meeting with fucking Seth Rogen, and he just rips like the 30-second long and
That's
just keeps
pretty funny.
John C. Riley.
That's pretty funny.
I disagree.
But
I
imagine
can't.
hearing that in real life.
That's the thing.
you
That's where it
hear
puts
a
me.
fart that goes for that long.
I'm out of the
those.
room.
So
if
I've-
I'm in an earshot of that, I'm leaving.
So I farted on a Zoom call once, and somebody thought someone knocked at my door.
You
They went,
told
I
me
think someone's at your door, and I had to get up and play it off and check the door.
corroborated the story.
And I was like, oh, no, no one was there.
Yeah, farts are hilarious. I had a time in my life where I recorded my farts because my one buddy,
Who?
James Fox, you know him?
Windsor Boy?
He's from Bell River, but we lived in Yellowknife together. He thought my farts were the funniest thing ever. And I was like, well, I'll just record some for you and send them over. I had like 28 farts. And they had different, like one sounded like a zipper, one sounded like a trumpet, one was the fastest fart in the world. And he would just fucking die. Like I'd play one of them and he'd be done for
Can
like
we
5
set
minutes.
the scene though here? Just to, I mean, I don't know this gentleman.
Yeah,
Sure he's brilliant.
No.
From Bell River, Ontario. Living in, where was he living at the time?
Yellowknife.
Yellowknife.
Where did you guys work together?
Yeah.
And
No, we didn't work
Where
together.
did he work?
He worked at a he
Yeah.
worked at a shelter for runaway kids. He worked the midnight shift, so like kids would come and
So when I'm looking at
there.
when I'm looking at resumes, if anyone walks in the runaway kid shelter in Yellowknife, I don't care about what their job experience. They could be walking in asking for directions. They just got hired for the midnight shift.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just trying to put. Sorry, brother.
But if
like,
you knew him, it would be even funnier because this is like 100% him. Like he will die laughing. One time he laughed in a movie. Like we were in watching, what's the one with fucking? It was like Bad Grandpa or something.
Yeah.
for fuck's sake.
He laughed for 15 minutes,
No.
and his laugh is like that high. Like you
it's
ever hear,
always people
you ever
with
hear
that
Kevin
laugh.
Preer laugh?
Yes.
It's
Come on.
just like that.
Can't.
My dad, my old man, doesn't laugh at anything, but a fart joke has him in tears. I've taken my dad to every Jackass movie, and like at one point he slid out of the chair
He just fell
and
like
laid,
a fax.
yeah, like in the wheelchair area of the movie theater. We have all that space. He slid out of the chair and then was in the fetal position, just laughing
an animal.
as like a 52-year-old.
Your dad
man.
gets a pass though because he's a
Yeah.
fucking legend.
That shit's so funny though. Jackass is
Jackass is great. The
amazing.
Jackass Forever is coming out. Looks, but they've excluded Bam because I think he does math.
Yeah.
Oh really? I
He's
totally forgot
fucked.
about him.
Bam looks terrible.
You know who looks
Can we-
great?
Can we pull Bam up?
We
Do
definitely.
you know
can.
who looks amazing?
Johnny
Knoxville?
Knoxville?
Fucking Steve-O.
Yeah, well, that's what
Got
happens
the
when you get
veneers.
clean.
Have you ever heard the story about when he ripped the HIV blow?
Yeah.
There was like blood spattered, and like he knew the dude had the HIV. And I've totally forgot this guy. Even
There,
existed.
there. That's
Which-
Bam.
Which one do you want?
That
This
one.
one?
Whoa!
He looks like he's about to walk onto the scene and to catch a predator.
He's in trouble.
He's not doing well.
He sounds like Ozzy Osbourne too.
Yeah,
Like,
that's
he's-
only works if you're Aussie.
Yeah, that's not a good
What
one.
happened? He looks like he sells used Toyotas.
Dude, he's gross looking
Right?
now.
But
So-
yo, pull up Steve-O.
They
They went the other way.
everybody went the other way.
I haven't seen Knoxville since. he
Knoxville's
did
like
it.
a silver
look how
fox
This
now.
guy's a fucking beauty.
Like I'd let that guy watch my kids.
Yeah, he seems like a good guy. Salt of the earth,
He was fucked for a
dude.
while.
There's
though.
nothing.
You ever
There's
watch
no
the
one
Steve-O
on this planet. It's funny
documentary?
because you guys all know him. There's no one on this planet that reminds me more of Brett Moss than this fucking guy.
Oh,
100%.
shout out Brett Moss though.
We could get that picture right there next to
Yeah.
him with the orange shirt on.
Yeah.
Middle on the left.
That one?
That looks like fucking Moss.
Does. Give him a little face tattoo and we're
my
good.
You know who
Jesus.
Moss reminds me of is the fucking Affleck guy that got canceled.
What? Oh, the
his
guy
name?
with the. Wait, why did he get canceled?
He said some racist shit. I think.
Come on.
Gilbert
right now.
Godfrey
Yeah, Gilbert Godfrey.
got canceled after
Yeah.
all this time. I was always a bad person.
Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about the fucking guy who played the bird in Lion King.
Iago. Yeah.
Actually. Oh, I didn't hear it.
Yeah.
There's a certain
Or
Hollywood
I'm making
Squares?
this up, but I'm pretty sure it happened.
That's unbelievable. I didn't know they were coming out with another one.
Yeah.
Is it just the same dumb shit?
Oh yeah, for sure.
I thought he got out of it.
No, he's right back in.
I go where the money's at, I guess.
Yeah.
I think
R.I.P.
the world
Ryan
needs
Dunn.
this now.
Do you
I
think
it's-
the internet has ruined Jackass because of how much?
Well,
they
let's
can do on
talk.
the
Can we?
internet?
We were meaning to save this for the show because you're our. You know what you are? You're our. Fuck is his name? You're Geraldo. You're our Geraldo Rivera. You're boots on the ground. You're out there in the internet taking hits for us. Yeah. You're like, Geraldo was way too close to like mortar fire. It's like, dude, I get it. Like, you're in Afghanistan. Yeah. Like, you don't have to be in a foxhole.
Show us some stock footage.
Right.
Yeah, you don't have to be there.
It's like the weatherman in the storm. It's like, dude, get back in the Humvee, man. We get it. There's a hurricane outside.
Geraldo also interviewed like gang members in LA once, and a dude shoved a handgun in the front of his pants and blew his dick off.
During the thing.
Yeah, while Geraldo was interviewing him.
That's amazing.
Geraldo's like, let's see that piece of yours. And the guy like pulled out his gun. He's like, that's pretty impressive. And the guy went to put it away and just blew his dick off.
Cheddar bobbed his own hog?
Yeah.
Yo.
Right in front of Geraldo.
That's amazing.
That's fucking awesome.
But no, you bring up a good point. The internet ruining this. The fucking milk crate thing.
Yeah. Can you dig
So
into
the milk
that
crate rose in popularity last year. I don't know if you guys remember this. I was in Australia. Look up Australia milk crate. It like was used to like apprehend a bad guy. Like someone used a milk crate and like strapped someone's head under it.
Oh my God.
Do you guys remember this? I was in Oz. Just click one of those photos. Fucking amazing. God love Australia. Someone did something and they just held him down. Look at this.
Milk
This
crate?
is what happens when you take guns away from your citizens. I forget the backstory, but someone popped off. Maybe they like hit a woman. I don't want to like perpetuate misinformation, but if you don't like this, then you probably would have stopped listening to the podcast a long time ago. They said someone just found a milk crate and they trapped this guy under. But now the milk crate has reemerged in a much less heroic fashion.
This just reminds me. Remember that game? Like I never got to play it as a kid, but I always saw it on TV. The Mousetrap game.
Yeah,
where you had to trap the mouse.
Dude,
that's
wanted that so
essentially
bad as a kid.
Everyone did. That's essentially what they did.
Real life.
They're like, and now you go in the milk crate.
Yeah, I remember being in Oz. It was I don't know, January 2 years ago or something.
So
but now the milk crate game. To your point about the internet ruining Jackass.
Yeah, what is this milk crate thing?
Okay, it's not a game.
It's a challenge.
I can't. You know what is a challenge for these people? Their GED. That's the fucking challenge.
Look at this shit right here.
So the idea is you're just supposed to be able to stability or something. I love how you're already laughing.
Dude, it's fucking so funny because like I saw it and I'm like, there's no fucking way that this can be real. I'm like, why are people talking about milk crates? Everybody's like, oh, I could do it. And I'm like, what are they talking about? So I got on Twitter, as I always do, and I found
TomTom pages.
The videos of it. And
are they great?
I mean, these
Can we watch a video?
I'm seeing the before and after of this photo and like how he goes from frame 1 to frame 2.
I need to know.
It's just, I mean, I don't know. Like at this point, any port in the storm.
Yeah.
If it's not fucking COVID, this is
the
what
dude.
happens.
This is the guy.
This is the distraction we need.
Okay. Oh.
Yo, this is
get
like,
it.
what was her name? Takes a tumble? Remember
Get
that?
it, boo.
He's...
Oh. Throw some singles at this fucking guy. This guy's at Magic City right now.
This is not going to end well.
Face off the ground.
Oh, man.
Dude, and there's just so many of them.
Because like what is the best case scenario? That's how I look at things.
You get to the other side.
But
this
like,
guy's rolling a blunt doing it.
There's no way he's going to make it.
With the threes on.
I was going to say, those are not
I think he looks like a Mets fan, though. We already know how this is going to end. Idiot. Shout out Ryan Orr.
Sorry, Orr.
Oh.
I love the hype crew. This is going to go from bad to worse. Has anyone done it successfully? Obviously they have, right? Like there's some Cirque du Soleil person who does
I mean,
this.
I think we replaced the hip airplane with the milk crate.
Please don't. I don't. Oh, hold on. There was like a weird... Lundy, did you make that frame shift happen?
I skipped it.
Okay.
Because he stands up there for a while. He's trying to roll a joint.
All right.
Oh, look at that dude, though.
Comes the homies.
Yeah.
Rolling up on the block. Yeah, I mean, at this point, if social media is, the new government, as long as they're not talking about COVID, I'm a big fan, right? And then Nipsey Hussle fucking cover guy comes in as the hype man.
Anyway, this is what people are doing right now.
Well, it's funny because it's just the massive overcorrection, right? And so the more we see this guy, there's no way. He's got the jeans on.
He doesn't have it. He doesn't have it.
You don't think so?
I don't think so. No.
Oh!
Bad cameraman, but
I think he gets extra points for the dismount. He kind of pulled a running man mid-stride.
Yeah,
he smokes it off. Blunts, I think, are impaired. Are blunts a part of it?
I don't know.
Is this part of the criteria?
So it's definitely like front lawn in the hood kind of thing.
Well, yeah, because hold on. If anyone's ever been in the trap, it's like there's no other place. There are milk companies going, where the fuck did they get all these crates from?
I was just going to say, I live in the city of Toronto, and I'd love a few milk crates. Next to impossible.
Yeah, they're so hard.
Because they're all being stacked on that guy's lawn.
Yeah.
But it's like the thing is, the milk crates were in these neighborhoods before they had this idea.
Yeah.
They were in it. It's like if you ever gone through have you ever gone through Wallsburg?
Briefly, like quickly.
Do you know how many school buses there are in Wallsburg?
No.
And a disproportional amount to the number of kids that are on school buses. It's like it's a mode of transport. It's just like a commuter vehicle.
That's wild.
Yeah. So, buddy, that's
I love this one.
And like, I mean, good on you for taking the risk, but it doesn't seem to be as if like they chose a surface. This guy's on grass.
Well, that's the whole point. Is that it's like it's
High
uneven
risk.
and it's kind of fucked up. There was a guy in a gym doing it, and he was like
milk crates
lifting
in a gym.
Yeah, he was like lifting dumbbells and eating his chicken and rice. And then everybody went on. They're like, "Fuck this! Like you're not even on grass. Like you didn't do it.
They're not even on grass."
Yeah. Basically, fuck you to anyone that didn't just like nosedive it in from a story and a half up.
Yeah.
Is there a set number of crates that you need to eclipse?
I think the bigger the better. I think people
Yeah,
are
I
just
think that's
showing
what it
off
is.
now.
Showing off. I don't know if that'd be the word I'd use.
I would.
So interesting.
It's great.
But it does seem to be like when shit goes crazy, people it's just overcorrections, right? Like it's just a trend to be hit. Remember what was Lundy? I'm just laughing at your laugh. What was going on in the world when kids were eating Tide Pods?
What was? I feel like Tide Pods was around the bath salts time.
Nah, Tide Pod was post bath salts. I think Tide Pods was like Zika virus.
Okay, that sounds about right.
Days? Yo, it's been a decade.
It's been a real decade.
Remember when Australia was on fire and then the world got worse?
Yeah.
It was like, here's the map of how big this fire is. And everyone's like, oh, man, glad we got over. Hold on a minute.
Yeah.
And then the whole world shut down.
Do you remember when it came out and there was that epidemic in the States of dudes dressing like clowns and just intimidating
just
people?
standing on
I'd be
roads.
fucking murking motherfuckers.
Just coming out of the forest?
Because I think like that's when you bring back King Hit and the whole thing comes full circle. If we just start doming fuckers that dress like clowns, I think that's what we need. We need like, look, if you're going to pop off and try and do some shit, like there has to be a consequence. Because a cop can just be like, yo, dude, what are you doing? It's like, I'm just standing here. We need to have a goon squad. Like we need to have like
the Guardian Angels?
Or I was thinking about,
from the 70s?
I was thinking about the elves, like the elves in Santa Claus.
I like how you go to the elves in Santa Claus with the
Christmas,
E, and I go to Guardian Angels, the like militant street protection service of the Bronx.
No, Tim Allen. I've been thinking about that movie for the last couple months. I was like, I can't wait till it's socially acceptable for me to watch Santa Claus.
I've never not stopped thinking about Santa Claus.
Okay, so you're a fan.
I'm a huge Tim Allen fan.
Best Christmas movie of all time.
Yeah,
it is.
It's go on record.
When they're asking, when they're interrogating them, I'm like, "Who are you?" And he's like, "Popo Gijo."
Chris Kringle. Santa Claus. We had a point to this. Skill acquisition.
Yeah, let's just
awkwardly hard transition.
Segue right into
Yeah, now we're going to talk about things. It's funny because the podcast audience clearly divides between people who listen to the first half bullshit and people who listen to the semi-smart stuff. So if you're smart, start now. We should timestamp this.
Yeah.
One timestamp. 2 podcasts, really.
The only.
With 37 minutes in, we're going to fucking talk about skill acquisition.
So now is the smart restart of the podcast. Yeah. But I think we can pull this full circle. I always like to try and derive out of the bullshit something that makes sense.
Okay.
I think this doesn't matter at all. And that's the whole point. It's the idea of like,
what does?
Do you know what really matters? And I think that's kind of like the secret question to everything when it comes to programming. Answering the question of, do you know what really matters?
Russell Brand. Have you ever watched his podcast?
No.
Big Russell Brand fan.
Big Russell Brand guy.
Big Russell Brand guy.
Watch Get Him to the Greek.
Dude, Smoking Jeffrey? Can we just get a furry wall here?
We got to go back. We're going off the rail again.
One of my favorite fucking scenes of all time was Jonah Hill smoking the Jeffrey and stroking the furry wall.
Yeah, it's a great film.
But he has some like pretty deep podcasts. He's actually quite
He's a pretty smart guy.
Dude, lights out. Like his recall he's like, you know what he's like? He's like a vegan hippie Ben Shapiro.
Okay.
If you follow the reference. Because Ben Shapiro is like quick to a fault.
Yeah.
Like he's quick to a fault because he sounds like a whiny little fuck. Because like he's already got you beat in chess and you haven't even touched a piece yet. You're like, God, he's like that but British. So there's like a little bit of
the accent really does
accent. It's endearing. I think
it's not even a British. It's like some type of sick English accent.
Yeah.
Like, you know what? He seems like a sick person.
Like it's like if you were arguing with like Mick Jagger or something.
Exactly.
He's got that sort of rock star je ne sais quoi. But he talked about on one of his podcasts, like the most important thing is discernment.
Yes.
And like from a very deep philosophical, very meta, it's like discernment, knowing essentially what fucking matters, and when it matters. And I think that's like when we look at like the organizational behavior side of training, because you can understand like down to the adaptation on the cellular level. It's like, great, what do you do with it?
Correct.
Right. And I think that's like the discernment that you can draw out of understanding how to bin and categorize movements based off of reference points, and then being like, I don't flip through the yellow pages to find my friends. That's what the white pages are for. So it's like, I don't flip through a particular index of exercises if I'm looking for hypertrophy, if I'm looking for, and it's discerning between which index I'm looking to search, right, is going to be number one. I think your number one indicator driver of efficiency in programming.
Yeah, and I think that's really like where the skill acquisition course, like now, you know, opening the intake to the third semester of it, has really like started to drive itself. Like the more I talk about it, the more I talk to people about it, the more I think about it, and then like the more we engage with level 2 and things like that, it just becomes this idea of like establishing what matters from like, again, you know, establish a reference point, bin an index, and then go down to like what are like the core tenets, no matter the goal of driving progress in an individual. And usually, not even usually, almost all the time, it's actually recovery.
Right.
Because recovery plays into higher frequencies of training increase skill increases proficiency increases the efficiency of the exercise you're doing. If you're more efficient at an exercise, you do less, get more from it, more recovery.
Yeah. As an example, I'm writing the barbell manual right now, and I'm trying to constrain the definition of a squat.
Yeah.
Like, shout out Pat Davidson. But Pat does this thing, and he doesn't do it anymore, but he drove me nuts when he would use the term squatty squats, which is just standing quad extensions.
Okay.
Right? So it's like a completely upright squat. And it's like, I think the squat can exist within a spectrum from, you know, it's knees, hips, and back.
Yeah.
And the reason we use the term to designate what the exercise is to anticipate the stress and the stimulus that we need to recover from and where that stress is allocated.
Yes.
Right. So it's like, if I'm putting a squat in a program and someone is executing a squat, if it's a blind program or if I'm coaching someone, I want it to be, you know, a quad glute bias, minimal stress on the lower back. Right. So I can program, you know, by minimizing interference of, you know, concurrent exercise selection and execution in a program. I want to be able to program with certainty a maybe more stressful exercise on the lower back, specifically, that's not going to be directly interfering with the execution of a squat. So it's like, for me, it's like counterbalance, heels elevated, as squatty as we can get from the terms of being the pendulum shifted entirely into the knees. So it's easy to know where the squat ends from an anterior shift or a pendulum shift to the anterior, where it's like, if we completely unload the hips and the back, that's a quad extension, right? If we're just training knee extension. So if we think about that pendulum shift, it was like, okay, heels elevated counterbalance, your spine is probably going to be completely upright. That parameter is going to leave you very unloaded through the back and very loaded from a range of motion perspective through the knee, the amount of displacement of the knee forward from your center of mass. However, it's not easy for people to constrain the opposite end of that spectrum. So it's like, for me, it's like, if we move that spectrum from like heels elevated counterbalance into like a goblet, move the load more anterior, high or front high low bar. The low bar is just a designation to say this based off of the person's proportions is going to be the position where the knees and the hips will still load simultaneously. If we go to the point where the hips and back load exclusively, we're no longer squatting. It's a hinge. It's a hinge, right? Like, it's a hinge with a bar on your back, which is a silly movement because you're probably going to gain better leverage and the better load for those tissues if the bar was in front of you, like a deadlift or a Romanian deadlift or a trap bar deadlift. So for me, a squat's spectrum exists from a counterbalance, heels elevated, you know, squat, which is primarily, without being exclusively isolated to like a quad extension, it's primarily just going to be loaded in the quads, and all the travel is going to happen at the knee. As that pendulum shifts, we now end up on the other end of the spectrum, where it's like as low a bar position as you can maintain by initiating the squat with the hips, knees, and back simultaneously. If we have to lose that initial part of that pendulum in the knees, and we're just loading into the hips and back, i.e. hinging, it's no longer a squat anymore. That allows me to then start to program effectively around that exercise, right? So it's like when we understand the implications of an exercise, the debt of an exercise, this fucking fly, God damn it. The debt of an exercise, we can begin to anticipate the recovery demands of the movement based off of how that movement fits into the starting skill level of the lifter.
Yeah. And like, that's something that it comes down to the fact that, like, you know, every Tuesday morning in my lab, the big joke is like nothing matters and this like nihilistic approach to thing. But the thing is, nothing matters until it matters. And once it matters, you realized it always did. And that sounds kind of confusing.
Sounds like one of your movies that you watch.
But it's like, it sounds confusing, but it comes down to the idea that, you know, powerlifting, for example, can look from the outside in as, you know, a pretty simplistic, very specific way of training. Sure. I compete at the squat, the bench, and the deadlift. I use a barbell. The more time I spend using the barbell, the better I'm going to get at the skill, the more I'm going to be able to drive, you know, applications specific to the sport that I do. But there's all these other implications of what you do when it comes to powerlifting to be good in a competitive sense, and in a physics sense, making movements less biomechanically sound, more physically sound, as work is what powerlifting is, limiting your work to increase your output. But what happens on the back end of that is you often leave off a lot of these biomechanical considerations, like something you talk about in L1. So how can we bin and categorize the exercises, like you said, to be able to go, here's the criteria of this lift I do, and from that, this is what's missing and needs to be incorporated somewhere else. Right. Like, we trained legs today, and my big consideration going into this leg session is, obviously we're training from a hypertrophy standpoint. The reference point is challenging the quad. We're picking exercises that best challenge the quad. Now, I'm coming into this workout doing this in addition to a powerlifting program that I do. So I have to make the immediate consideration of what volume am I assigning to this workout outside of effective volume. Right. And that's when it comes to, if you're going to add to a program, be adding to something that, like, when you do add something that's efficient and effective, and don't add just to create a greater level of fatigue to recover from. So for me, I train with a barbell 4 days out of the week on my back in the squat, 2 days out of the week in the deadlift. When we get to the pendulum squat, there isn't really a necessity for me to groove this movement, to pre-exhaust the movement, doing sets of, 10 to 12 reps on the way up. I'm really just looking for some level of like physical arousal and cognitive arousal moving up to that top set so I can execute something that's a higher intensity. So I would rather take 4 or 5 warm-up sets of 4 reps, feel gradually and heavier weights, rather than take 2 to 3 sets of 10 to 12, because that's arbitrarily the rep range I'm working, and there's some need to feel all 12 reps on the way up.
Yeah. I mean, that differentiation of medium driving volume and being one of the biggest drivers of skill, I think, is something that's completely lost when people who don't understand like the biomechanics. Yeah. Right. Who I think, from, you use the word physical model, or like I'll use the word like mechanical model. If we just look at the 2 dimensions, there's, like you said, kind of an L1 principle where it's like, we see the sagittal plane. Right. We don't see the transverse plane. We don't see time. Yeah. It's like, we trained with Calvin Burgess last week, and Calvin's like a barbell jockey like you, right? Like he's 4 or 5, 6 days a week, 7 days a week. He would just kind of like, his training to this point in his career has been almost exclusively on a barbell. And we put him on like some prime, it's grooved for you, right? Like, as long as you know where that arc is going to move, like, you're fine. And his ability to drive output there was huge. So it's like, and there are people like, and you see it with detrained individuals who don't have that experience on a barbell, who don't have like a work capacity near failure on any medium, even on that like very grooved machine. They're still going to be trying to find that path of least resistance as they fatigue a primary muscle group. They're still going to have a scap that elevates, a shoulder that adducts, and they're going to be trying to find a muscle to complete that task. So it's like, and that's where like an assessment comes in. and having an assessment based around skill so that your initial program is as close to minimum effective dose as possible. And that's where, if you start to categorize exercise from a skill standpoint in order of complexity, that's how the index works to the reference point of hypertrophy, where it's like, or sorry, not hypertrophy, of skill acquisition, where it's like that could be a very different index of exercises. And when I say index, I mean like this is the base model, and this is the GT model. Like this is going to be the most effective. You know, it's something like, I remember during COVID when people were doing the weird. Remember when people like, have you ever been to a strip club and someone like twerks on a wall?
Yeah.
Yep.
I love I'm going to get 2 yeses across the board. Where like the feet are on the wall, the hands are down, but Eugene Teo turned that into a quad extension. Do you remember that? Where people were putting bands around their hands and at the back of their knees and going through this weird inverted twerk quad extension thing, which, hey, shout out Eugene for being an innovator. But at the same time, it's like, if our reference point is like, let's work out from home and try to challenge the quad, it's like that exercise finds its way to the top. A lot of people around the world did that when they were just locked in their house with a fucking band. If the goal is hypertrophy and not just keeping yourself sane and doing resisted knee extension, probably not going to be the exercise we lean on, right? Like a very unstable external environment. A lot of things could fatigue before the quad, the resistance profile of the band on the strength curve, whatever. But given the index of like, hey, or given the reference point of like, hey, you have a band and you can't go outside, it's like, that's pretty good. That's pretty neat. Where it's like those reference points for quad or lower body exercises, given the constraint of I'm working out at home, or given the reference point of like, I want my quads to grow, or I want to run fast, or I want to not have my knees hurt. Each one of those reference points should in your mind change the order, and sometimes just completely eliminate exercises from that respective index. And just understanding how a reference point can be present in a microcycle on a day, a mesocycle across weeks, and a macro cycle, maybe even across like a quarter, 6 months, a year of training, allows you to just discern whether or not that exercise should be there. Like, what is the reference point?
And I think that's like it comes back down to like this question I ask myself, which is like, does this matter? And that comes like, I think you make the perfect example of what happened with COVID and people working out from home, or people changing, their gym environment. People came from big box gyms to having home gyms that might be just barbells, just plates. And, due in part largely probably to our own faults, talking about length tension relationship and the biomechanics of things, I've fielded constant and endless questioning of, how can I train the length and quad at home? And I have a kettlebell and a barbell. And remembering that to establish what matters, the first thing is to know the goal.
Right.
Which is more failure criteria than it is success.
Right.
Because success will inevitably be different things based on timeline, frequency. There's so many variables that go into what actually success will look like, but you have a clear-cut idea of what failure can be, because it's not the thing that you want.
Sure.
It's quite simply just whatever isn't what you're looking for. And that's failure criteria. So that becomes kind of the first question in the priorities of what matters. The second question is, what is the environment in which I work from? If you have a barbell, you have to kind of accept, in Calvin's case, the subsequent longer runway of progression that is the skill, moving towards using that barbell effectively to challenge muscles if that's what you're doing. And then you have to understand, how can I utilize this barbell in order to still drive output while I'm developing that skill? Something Calvin talked to us about, and I think it's in the end of one of our videos, is this idea that he does downsets. And I myself am not a big proponent of downsets. I think yourself, you're not a huge back offset fan for the most part either. But Calvin's interpretation of a down or back offset is very different to ours. He utilizes a vastly different rep range, almost inherently changing the exercise altogether.
Which would be, from a hypertrophy perspective, what we would do with more machines in here.
Correct.
Right? And it's like that might be through a seemingly regression of overall load by adopting a different position through that length tension relationship. Like, because he's not using a barbell to be strong.
No.
Where it's like you're using a barbell to be strong. That change in reference point changes how we categorize, even as something as simple as a rep scheme, right? Like, where you're probably going to be doing something that looks more like inverted in rep schemes of lower volume, potentially higher higher amounts of sets, where he's trying to get that volume in a more dense compact, so he can move on to his back down sets, which will allow him to drive further volume of that movement. It's in a perfect world, Calvin train here, where he could accumulate that volume by means of the 7,000 different machines.
Yeah.
Rather than that, it's like he needs to work in different rep ranges, maybe something that looks like different energy systems. You could get into like fiber type or whatever the fuck. But he's just doing that because his reference points are hypertrophy, but his tools are barbell. Not necessarily the best tool for that job, but if that's the constraint of the environment, it's like, well, that now becomes different. Like for me, for strength on a barbell, it's like, if I'm hitting, God, for now, it's like a 200-pound squat. But if there was a point where my top sets were in the mid 600s, the idea of a back down is like, what? I just, no. Like I'm going to maybe do, my back downs will be lunges, my back downs will be hamstring curls or like GHRs or core work or something like that. But there's not much in the tank after that. With him, it's like, that's not the goal. Like the goal is to push a higher threshold, to increase his work capacity, or I'm just trying to put up a bigger number. And so it's just understanding how to identify your reference point. Because a lot of people, like, they end up with these muddled power builder programs because their reference points are just all over the fucking place. Yeah. And the reference points is like, it's like being like gender fluid. It's like, wait, you're a female at noon, but you're a male at dinner time? Like, how the fuck does this work? I don't really understand. It's like, for one exercise, you're a bodybuilder. For the next exercise, you're a powerlifter. It's like, you're going to run interference on both of those. That makes you a terrible version of each one of those reference points.
Yeah, and it's like it's the conversation I always have about the heavy back squat followed by the really light front squat. It's like if your back squat is 500 pounds, but due to the instabilities that you have or lack of skill, your front squat is 275, just don't do the front squat. Like that's inherently the addition of fatigue, not the addition of progress.
Right.
Where it's like you could go your route, and it's like if what you're getting out of that front squat is possibly, to some like deep science level of like pronation, internal rotation of the hip, challenge of this quad and hip in a more lengthened position, that's cool. There's a definite better way to do that, and that's probably a rear foot elevated, front foot elevated split squat, contralaterally loaded, if I got that right.
Yeah, I would even think too, like that application changes, that reference point changes if you use wraps or not. Right?
100%. And
I was a wrap squatter, so all of a sudden that high front squat or high bar pause post 750, the reference point for that exercise is more like positional specific hypertrophy and less to do with overall strength. It's like that's adding nothing.
No.
From a stimulus standpoint to my top end strength, it's keeping the outer limits of my tolerance to deeper knee flexion and ankle dorsiflexion accessible to me as the confines and the options for my movement decrease as the weight on my back during that top set of low bar squat increases.
And this is like, even for myself as a sleeved squatter, where I will take the sessions that we do, and like one of my biggest pet peeves, something I have no respect for, is people who do Bulgarian split squat keeping their sleeves and heels on.
Yeah, what?
When it's like the point of that is, like you said, is to develop these greater capacities at more end ranges. Take the sleeves off.
Yes.
Like I'm doing the Bulgarian split squat because it's an ability for me to get into those deeper degrees of hip flexion and knee flexion, load it more appropriately, and strengthen everything up that chain that I don't get to strengthen when I low bar sleeved back squat.
Yeah. I mean, ditch the fucking shoes, ditch the sleeves, ditch the belt, dumbbells, both hands or something like that.
And that's the opportunity that variability provides you.
Right.
Now, I think like another topic that I started getting into a lab today, and we're going to get into way more in this semester of skill acquisition, came about from something I just kind of, we talked about this when we taught in Tampa. It's that idea, like when you're talking about something, you all of the sudden like realize what your whole point is, and it's not usually what you walked in attempting to say. And it's the idea that in detrained or relatively less trained individuals with lower training age specific to sport, the variability of their program is built in to their own lack of proficiency in the movement.
Right. Rep 1 and rep 2 are your variability in exercise because you're not good at rep 1 or rep 2.
You don't need to do 5 different kinds of back squat. Right. Your high bar back squat 5 times a week is inevitably probably 25 different back squats.
Right.
That variability, and we know that variability increases our ability to drive frequency because we're not challenging these same muscle groups to the direct bias. Well, in beginner programs, we can see an almost absurd amount of like exercises provided because that variability's their last, like their inefficiency at the movement.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that and just putting on muscle should be your main focus. And then that's really where, like, and it's funny to see you were going off on you know what I have no respect for?
Yeah.
Is the idea that, like, cleaning up movements. Right. So that just means that's and it is like a frustrating topic for more advanced lifters to talk about cleaning up and movements, especially from a more externally stabilized. Like, you don't need to clean up your seated preacher curl, right? Like, you don't need to, if anything is being indicated in and being tracked with the acronym PPS, doesn't need to get cleaned up.
No.
Plates per side?
It's probably an overreach scenario.
Right. Yeah, so it's like the idea that you need to spend some, like, you need to gain some efficiency in a movement that is plate loaded, likely externally stabilized to the nth degree, is just like, there's minimal variability because the constraints of the external environment are going to allow for such mindless reproducibility of that. So your muscles are not going to gain, your neural output is not going to become more efficient. Your progress in that means you're probably undershooting your initial weight set and subsequently overall volume in your first couple of weeks, and you're probably only meeting effective rep ranges in like weeks 3 to 4 of your program. It's like, you just bitch it out. Like, oh, I need to clean this up, you know, felt a little off. It's like, dude, it's on a track. It didn't feel, as long as the bearings didn't break and that fucking arm is still attached to the machine, it didn't feel off. It's still on. I can see it's still fucking on. That swing arm is still on. It's not off. So, like, a lot of times that's just wasted volume, and that's how a lot of people are, I think, are just auto-regulating their programming rather than just like sending it on something like that and really using the right tool. They're driving too much output elsewhere. They have these environments where it allows for a lot of output. They don't feel like they can push that output on something like a seated overhead press, a seated chest press machine, a seated preacher curl, where it's like, you know, I use seated a lot because it's going to stabilize the pelvis and spine, further negating any need for co-contraction and further negating any need for cleaning up. They just don't even do the exercise, right? If you don't feel the need that you can execute it balls to the wall, and if we're using those constraints of that environment to drive a large amount of output, seeing as it's so externally stabilized, if you feel the need to clean up a movement on a machine, pull that exercise from your program.
Correct.
Because it's like, you're already driving so much fatigue. You're so fatigued that you can't fucking press on a machine with any sort of efficiency. It's like, pull it. Or pull a working set, you know, I got a little shaky, and then don't do a second set, right? Yeah. Or drop a training day, add a rest day, put a floating rest day in, 2 days on, 1 day off, or whatever. Because it's like, clearly that is a huge fucking signal that you're not recovering enough, that this environment, which should allow you to push the fucking envelope, even that is being pushed too far.
Yeah, and I think, like you had said, it's the idea of like pulling an exercise out. Like, oftentimes the answer is to remove something. In a lot of aspects, like across performance, like not even programming wise, supplementation wise, nutrition wise, it's like the first answer is usually to pull something back to allow something else to express itself. Like, we can see elbow pain in the low bar squat. Don't pull back the low bar squat. Pull back the things that make the elbow hurt. Like, they're over there. Yeah. They're meant to be removed if what you want to do is drive intensity or volume in the low bar squat. Right. Now, if you don't, then don't do low bar squat. Like, choose a non-elbow heavy lower body movement. But I think people, we've had this conversation before. It's the idea of, what can I add? Right. Like, my shoulder hurts. It's like, okay, well, stop shoulder pressing. It's like, okay, well, what should I put in there? Right. Don't do shoulder things.
Should I do my cable external rotations?
Yeah, it's like, no, that's still shoulder volume. Right. Right. And I think we just, we disassociate. We get so hooked on to the exercise itself, and not just the idea that this is just an overall stimulus being driven to the athlete.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you use the idea of like debt. Yeah. And, you know, you coined the term training economy. That podcast is what we were both riddled with the vid. Yeah. Riddled. We recorded that in your condo. We were so COVID. Yeah. We were like, full send COVID deep end. But yeah, the idea of training economy, and that, you know, these debts need to be paid off, and we pay them off through adequate recovery, and adequate recovery starts from adequate programming, right? And that minimum effective dose in programming. So like, if the idea is addition by subtraction, subbing that in for an exercise with, you know, seemingly a lower coefficient is still going to push you far away from the goal, which is getting back to like some sort of, you know, allostatic load, accumulative stress aggregation that you can ultimately recover from. So anything is actually going to slow your, like the cable external rotation in lieu of a shoulder press is like, what? Like, no, the whole idea is to unload the shoulder to alleviate stress at the elbow so that it can recover, and then we'll start to reintroduce lesser tolerable volumes once that recovery is taken place. Like, it's just pendulum shifts. This idea that, you know, there is a very antiquated model in like the call it collagen reformation, call it rehab, call it whatever, science behind like 6 to 8 weeks. Yeah. 6 to 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. And it's like, I think we can mitigate, you know, that's like post-op reformation, right? Like that's pretty drastic if you need to take 6 to 8 weeks off something. Most people end up doing 6 to 8 weeks of fucking around with like a lesser stimulus where it's like, if you took 2 weeks and just weren't a fucking Jerry and like actually didn't do shit that was accumulating, like don't do a Peterson step up if you have patella tendonitis, because that's still causing the quad to contract, and we just let that completely chill. Maybe we have something that we can build upon when we get back.
Yeah, it's like that idea like behind the training economics. Like if you download Wealth Simple, which is like an investment app, and like I'm not a financial advisor, but a lot of things that are like self-regulated investing kind of make you go through like a quick crash course, just like ethically on like the basics of investing. And like the first thing they say is like, do you have any debt? If you say yes, everyone will tell you pay off your debt first before you go taking money and investing in things, because debt is always the thing that's bringing you down. So same thing with your training. It's like, first of all, what are my debts? And do I have a way of like paying those debts off? Is that recovery? Is that sleep? Is that nutrition? So it's like first thing in your program, you should check those boxes. It's like, do I have debt? Second thing is save money, like put aside money to save. Well, in training, that's understanding like the minimum effective dose. Where in my program can I save volume and not use it if I don't need to? And that's like, do you need 4x12 tricep extension, or do you need 2x10?
And I just think the biggest thing in not wasting volume is sacking up. Is like actually executing those
do a set.
Do a set. Try it. Rather than just hucking shit at a wall and hopefully a rep or two hits, it's like make them all hit.
Yeah.
And because that, like, cleaning up exercise execution is the one thing that's going to allow you to draw a very close link between the qualitative subjective assessment and the quantitative objective measuring. Is like, there's some people it's like not even worth programming for. It's like, dude, you're not fucking going there, man. Like, you gotta fucking, in order for this to count, you gotta make it count rather than just sitting there fucking counting reps. It's like you're just arbitrarily kind of getting this junk volume in, where it's like, you know, there's maybe 2 to 3 reps a set where you're actually driving enough like oxygen debt in the muscle itself to elicit or trigger that adaptation that you're looking for. Where it's like, you know, can I get there at rep 2? Can I get to that? You know, and that's where like I see lifters like Dan is always one that comes to mind. We're not like, you know, he's a big volume guy in the powerlifting world, but not big volume compared to what we got going on here. Where it's like he still looks like a bodybuilder because he fucking executes with like laser precision, and he's in this neural, endocrine, metabolic environment of adaptation or stimulus very quickly into a set. Where it's like the motherfucker stays working. Right? He's not like rep 1s to 3, you're kind of just jerking off. Rep 4, you're kind of getting tired. You got to be in it. Rep 5, 6. It's like halfway through rep 1, this guy's brain is like, please, for the love of God, stop put this down. And it's a 7 RM. So it's like, sack up, dude. Because like, and so I just think like, you know, the idea of being very precise with your exercise execution, having intent behind it, like that is everyone's rate limiter. It's like, can you fucking, because if you find someone that can send it, execute well, recover better, progress is through the roof.
And that's the thing, right? Like progress occurs not when training is stress,
right? So
it's like, can you get that laser focus so that your sessions are short and that they're made up of working repetitions?
It's Menser.
Like, it's the Mike Menser, you know what I mean? It's the Menser brothers. And that's that thing, like you can do 4x12 and you can get 4 working reps on your last set.
Yeah.
But it took you 48 repetitions of that joint moving or multiple joints moving to get you there. Or you could get your 4 working reps on set 1 and move on to the next thing. And that's something like, even with your training and my training when we train together, it's like it's a very much reflective process of like, what was that set?
Right.
And it's like, if that set wasn't the set, I'll do another one. But if that was the set, I'm like, no, let's go to something else.
Yeah. I remember I started training with B-Pack like a couple years ago when we were on tour. He was just like, we would leave, and some dog shit hour in the morning, some jackass hippie time to train. It's like, you're leaving the gym done at 5:30 a.m. And I was like, yeah, it was a pretty good workout. You did a couple of reps. And I was like, this motherfucker had me up at the ass crack at dawn. And I started to realize after like a few weeks that was actually a compliment.
Yeah.
Like that actually, I watch people train all the time, and people who don't, grow at all or put on any tissue or any strength or really reach anything looking like a single reference point in their programming, going like that, it wasn't meant to be denigration. That was a compliment.
Yeah.
Because it's like those reps are actually really elusive for most people. Yeah. He's like, yeah, man, like you probably did like 5 reps that session. I was like, fuck, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Now it's like, oh shit, 5 reps that's something. Because like what you count as a rep are the reps that count. It's like, you can do 5 and maybe increase a rep or 2 a week in exercise.
Yeah.
And have it in reserve where you can recover from those and program effectively and organize that. You're making progress. So it's so funny because I just, in my mind, it clicked one day. I'm like, he's not being a dick. He's actually being serious. And like, I could probably count the reps that he was counting, and those are the ones that counted.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem that hard.
And I think that's the thing that people don't track, right? Like, people track how much weight they did, how many reps they did. They track their HRV, they track everything else, but it's like really reflecting on your programming and going like, okay, these sets counted, these sets didn't.
Yeah.
Or reflecting on programming and before you just make a change to exercise, like, can we do away with the planned deloads?
Yes, we should.
Like, what is up with that? How do you know?
Well, yeah. I mean, that it's just like the undershooting for the first, I got to clean it up. It's like, why don't you just be more precise with your execution and your loading? And we can make, I don't understand why the progress can't be more akin to a linear progression rather than this wave step load of like, I'm going to do nothing and then probably undershoot my first 2 weeks back and then have an effective week of training, feel as I should feel in, hitting the nail on the head, freaking out because I'm actually working effective reps on a day-to-day basis. And rather than just augmenting my overall volume and training frequency, just taking a fucking nosedive in all of those like 30% volume, 30%. Why are these numbers a thing?
Yeah.
It's like, that fatigue you're feeling is exactly where you should be. Why don't you just like lean into that, spend a week or 2 there, and you'll actually learn how to adapt over time rather than just like, looking at the allostatic load model. The idea is to move that peak higher and higher and higher
every single time,
rather than just right. Yeah. Like it just, people get so close, and then it's like, well, week 3, week 4, whatever,
better
time to shut her down.
Better back off.
What you're just starting to work in a state, right? It's the same with a set. It's like when it starts to hurt in a set, you're like, oh, I'm done. It's like, this is where the reps started, and it's like that same principle when extrapolated out through a longer period of time is essentially the biggest mistake in programming I see. Is like we're finally at a point like peaking for a powerlifting meet. It's like you go through it because you're really digging that well deeper and deeper, and you're coming up and it's like, fuck, I don't even know if there's anything going to come up in this bucket this day, and it's like, no, there's still something in the well. All right, let's drop the hammer, and that can be an analysis of a rep to rep. Like, oh shit, that moves slow, rack it. We're done here. We've hit the nail on the head. That stimulus has been reached. Based off our ability to recover, move on. Or like in training weeks, it's like, this the arbitrary deload is just that. It's so arbitrary. And it means you've taken no consideration in how to progress, regress, adapt, optimize, because you've likely undershot your exercise selection, volume, and execution because you don't have a fundamental understanding around the skill required to do all of those things, to program an exercise, to execute an exercise. Yeah,
and I think that's where like I always see, like daily I'll see a post that says like, progress isn't meant to be linear. And like I feel so aggravated by that. Like,
over it.
Progress, as long as you don't quit, and you don't do something crazy,
Yeah.
it's pretty linear. It depends on how far back you look at it.
Your reference point.
Your reference point. Like if you ever watch guys who climb a mountain,
Right.
by the end of the time it took them to climb the mountain, they went from the bottom
Right.
and they went to the top.
Yeah, they're not sitting in a valley somewhere going, fuck. Man.
Yeah.
Like, we're sitting in the middle
And
of...
they don't go all the way back down to the bottom.
Right.
Like, yeah, they go up, they acclimate themselves, they come back down a little. They go up, they acclimate themselves, they come back down a little. And if you looked at this really close up, you'd be like, oh, there's all these regressions in this. But it's like, no, it's a linear progression.
Right.
With planned regressions around acclimating them to new levels. Like your programming can be the same. And I think people are so uncomfortable with doing the same thing again.
Oh my God.
And it's like,
And that's the skill part of it.
for 6 months, I just squatted the same weight every day.
Yeah.
But like, was the progressive overload the speed I squatted it? Was it the technique? Was it cleaning it up? But like, was that lift getting better week on week? And what was the detriment from a skill point of view to load that same weight that I knew challenged my skill, but I could move past when in that set it challenged my skill?
Right. Yeah. Challenge at rep 1 versus challenge at rep 5.
Exactly.
I think the idea of progressive overload, and I've said this on numerous occasions, should be progressive over stimulus.
Yes.
Right. Minimize or reducing the only stimulus that drives progress to load is such a shitty reductionist model.
Yeah.
And it really only leaves I can see where training gets boring. But if you even look at the intricacies of a set, like Dan starts working halfway through the first rep or the beginning of the first rep, where it's like someone doesn't start working until, halfway through rep 5. It's like, what were we doing the first 4 reps? And it's a constant pursuit of getting that, and that's why machines are super helpful from a muscle building perspective. But it's, again, just like, what is your reference point? What is this exercise here for? So if it's building strength, then barbell. If it's building size or hypertrophy, it's like, maybe you want those working reps to start earlier on a machine, right? If somewhere in between, you kind of, dumbbells allow for that sort of strength or the stability output parallel, or for those two stimulus to coincide, or those two reference points to exist in the same thing. But you want to put on more muscle, probably going to do it with a machine. You want to put on more strength, probably going to do it with a dumbbell. You want to have a reference point that's down the middle, sure, you can pick that. That tool exists.
And I think that's the thing. I see this with how people warm up for top set based programs. And I'm a big top set fan. I do relatively low volume at the barbell lifts. Even now, prepping to compete in January, it's I do one top set. I'll have a day a week where I do a top set, and then a day a week where maybe I do, some more sub-maximal work, but it's probably a variation. But with the days I do a top set, I see people that just take these arbitrary jumps every top set day. It's 1 plate for 5, 2 plates for 5, 3 plates for 5, 3 1/4 for 5, and then I'll start doing singles or whatever. But it's getting to that percentage that challenges your ability to execute with technique and execute with speed. And when you get there, if you're not moving the way you want to, why don't you just repeatedly take that set until it moves the way you want before you move on?
Yeah.
You're probably able to cut the majority of your volume down, because I don't really need to squat a plate. I don't really need to squat 2 plates. I don't need to test myself at 25%.
Right.
It's probably really important to test and cognitively prime, if you want to use that word, how I move at 70% plus if I'm going over 90.
Yeah.
So why don't I just spend more time at that weight till that weight's moving?
Right.
And usually people do their big lift earlier into their workout. They're getting out of their car, they're finishing their pre-workout, they're finding the perfect song, and there's all these constraints to their ability to execute that are in their way that most often, especially in the bodybuilding world, some of those best sets that you do come a third of the way into the workout. It's exercise 2 feels the best. And I think in the powerlifting realm, it's being comfortable, oh, this is a weight that does challenge me. Well, this is where I'm going to sit and express that technique until I'm ready and cognitively aroused enough to take that big top set.
Right. Yeah, I don't think a lot of people understand that model, the cognitive associative autonomous model, of skill acquisition. Because I think putting a name to it allows you, it frees up your mind. It allows for more deference in your training. It allows for it to be okay for these principles to exist, because it gives you a reference point for this mode of thinking to exist in, where it's people kind of intuitively, I think people intuitively feel this way about training, but have been told to think a different way about training, where it's when you have this metacognition around training that is, using the skill acquisition model as a reference point, opens up for a lot of deference and interpretation of the way you feel around your training.
Yeah.
And then it allows for your, you know, your exercise selection, your execution, your progression to exist in what otherwise, based off other models, seems like a more abstract, like in a more abstract realm, but it's actually exactly where you need to be. So I think like it's just very eye-opening concept for a lot of people, because it puts in words what a lot of people feel, which is like, oh, that makes a lot of sense, which is like something I've heard a lot from the course, is like, oh yeah, it helps put things into perspective, because that perspective is like really an explanation, a meta explanation of the way we actually thinking about exercise, which is this 36,000 foot view of it. But yeah, dude, I'm excited. This will come out 2 weeks now. We're looking at September. This course goes live October 11th. I got that right?
I believe so.
Yeah, so head over, prescript.com, skill acquisition, should be up on the homepage, Killian.Hamilton, at Killian.Hamilton. Lunderjack Productions, I think we should get the Fly an Instagram account, because that fucking Fly
It's been going.
was a big, I'm going to burn this fucking studio down, at the_muscle_doc.
Is that who you are?
I think that's who I am, so I've been told. All right, guys, appreciate it. You guys like all this new setup, to do the old subscribe thing on the YouTube. We'll be back next week.
Later days.